The first light of dawn crept through the curtains with the uncertainty of someone hesitant to announce the arrival of a new day. Samuel had been awake for hours, though he couldn't recall the last time he'd slept through the night without interruption. He lay still, feeling the chill of the sheets on one side of his body, as if his presence in that bed was more incidental than intentional. Beside him, Elizabeth slept undisturbed, her breathing steady, her face serene. It was an expression he had seen countless times, one that remained unchanged even after their arguments, especially after she had cut him down with her words, leaving him feeling smaller than he ever thought possible. She always slept soundly, as if the harsh words she'd hurled at him the night before had vanished into thin air, as if the wreckage left behind didn't matter. Their latest fight had been over something trivial, as always. Maybe he had forgotten to take out the trash, or perhaps he had been too slow in replying to a message. The reason was never important. The routine was. Elizabeth would raise her voice, let out a hollow laugh, and look at him like he was a clueless child in need of constant correction. God! Sammy, how can you be so useless? She had snapped one evening when he forgot to pick up milk on his way home. Her tone wasn't even angry anymore, just exasperated, as though she'd long given up expecting anything better from him. Sometimes I wonder how you even managed before you met me. I just forgot the milk, Elizabeth. Yes, but that's a problem. You forget everything. You forget to pay the bills on time. You forget what I tell you. You forget that you have a wife who has to remind you how to function. He hadn't responded. He knew better by now. The few times he had attempted to defend himself, Elizabeth had dismantled his arguments with the practiced precision of someone who had spent years honing her words into weapons. You can't even win an argument, Samuel. How pathetic. At first, he convinced himself that this was just part of her nature, that she didn't truly mean the things she said. Every relationship had its rough patches, didn't it? Love wasn't always smooth, and he had learned to accept her sharp edges. But over time, something inside him started to fracture. It became clear when he noticed how Elizabeth transformed around others. In public, she was warm, charming, effortlessly engaging. She could discuss any topic with an air of confidence, her laughter light and inviting. She held his hand in front of others, as if they were the perfect couple, as if she weren't the same woman who cut him down in private. One evening, during dinner at a friend's house, someone asked him about a major project at work. As soon as he began to explain, Elizabeth let out a soft, almost affectionate laugh. Oh, don't put too much pressure on him. He's not exactly known for his long-winded speeches. The group chuckled, unaware of the way Samuel's stomach twisted. Determined to continue, he pressed on. Well, the system updated our company. Elizabeth sighed, taking a slow sip of her wine. Sweetheart, that's not quite how it works. But don't worry, it's a complicated topic. The laughter rippled to the table again, but Samuel barely heard it. The message was loud and clear. You don't know what you're talking about. That was the moment of realization. Her words weren't just careless remarks made in frustration. They were calculated. She needed him to feel small, because control meant everything to her, and he had allowed it. That night, on the drive home, Samuel remained silent. But something inside him had already shifted. It wasn't a single fight that had brought him to this point. It was a weight of years, of 1,000 tiny cuts that had left no physical scars, but had slowly hollowed him out until he could no longer recognize the man he had become. That morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered into the room, Samuel slipped out of bed before Elizabeth stirred. He moved through the house quietly, as though he were already a stranger in it. When he reached the dining table, the same table where so many conversations had ended with veiled insults, he placed a folder down carefully. Inside were the divorce papers. He stood there for a long moment, staring at them. There was no anger left in him, not even regret. There was no sorrow, only a profound certainty, as though in that instant he had reclaimed something lost long ago. Samuel had no illusions about Elizabeth understanding. He didn't expect her to try to mend things. She didn't know how to lose, and she wouldn't know what to do once the power was no longer hers to wield. The only way to take that control from her was to leave, to deny her the ability to tear him down any longer. The clock on the wall chimed 7. Elizabeth would be coming downstairs soon. Samuel surveyed the dining room with a strange sense of detachment. Every element bore her imprint. The dark wood furniture she had insisted on, dismissing lighter tones as cheap, the framed European landscapes he never quite understood, but she swore added sophistication. Even the fresh flowers, always replaced before they could wilt, as if imperfection itself was intolerable. This house had never felt like his. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat in his usual chair, not out of hesitation, but to witness her reaction. He wanted to see the exact moment she realized what was happening. Minutes ticked by before he finally heard the soft steps descending the stairs. Elizabeth entered the kitchen wrapped in a satin robe, her hair still tousled from sleep. Her routine was unchanged. She moved to the coffee maker, poured herself a cup, and only then turned toward the table. That's when she saw it, the folder. Samuel observed as the realization took hold, watching her back straighten. Her gaze hardened. For once, she had no immediate retort. "What is this?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. He took his time, sipping his coffee, letting the silence stretch between them. Divorce papers. The weight of his words settled in the room. He had expected an outburst, maybe even anger, but instead, Elizabeth let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "You're not serious." "I am." She picked up the folder with just the tips of her fingers, as though the very touch might scald her. Flipping through the pages, she barely skimmed them before snapping the folder shut, her jaw tightening. "You can't be serious." "I am," he repeated, unwavering. Her expression shifted, disbelief morphing into disdain. "Is this because of something I said? Are you really going to overreact like this just because you can't handle a mature conversation?" There was the usual tactic. Dismiss it, turn it around, making the problem. Samuel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. For the first time in their fights, he felt utterly calm. "You told me no one else would tolerate me." She blinked, caught off guard. He didn't give her a chance to interrupt. "Well, now you don't have to tolerate me either." For the first time since he had met her, Elizabeth had no reply. Samuel memorized a moment, the precise second when the grip she had held over him shattered. It had been so simple. All he had to do was stop playing her game. He had made his decision weeks ago, the night he scheduled a meeting with his lawyer. "I want a divorce," he had said. The lawyer looked up, assessing him with the same measured gaze he had likely given countless men in similar situations. "Have you talked to her about this?" "No. She won't take it well." The lawyer nodded knowingly. "Physical abuse?" Samuel shook his head. "No, but emotional." It wasn't phrased as a question, but still, saying the words out loud made his throat tighten. "Yes." The lawyer pulled out a folder and began explaining the process, detailing his legal options. But Samuel barely heard him. He was too consumed by the years he had endured, by the realization that he had never even considered that he had the right to leave. And now, here he was, sitting at the dining table, watching Elizabeth struggle for words, knowing with absolute certainty that he had done the right thing. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She didn't create a spectacle. But in her rigid posture, the tightness of her jaw, the way her fingers tapped sharply against the table, he saw it clearly, pure, restrained venom. "You're making a mistake." Samuel gave her a faint smile. "Maybe, but it's not your problem anymore." He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the house without a backward glance. He didn't wait to see her sign the papers. He didn't linger to hear any last cutting remark. The crisp morning air greeted him as he stepped outside, and for the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe.